Seminary in Columbia got hitched on to Lenore Ryan University, the Lutheran college in Hickory, North Carolina. And that was a way of staying sustainable because the church is changing and money is changing. The seminary was struggling to stand on its own. So it kind of became affiliated with Lenore Ryan University, and that bought about another 10 years in the place where it has been for over a century. But now, as many things, the COVID era, it really accelerated a lot of financial hardship, and every 5 years there's half as many students coming in as there have been before, and so it just came to a place where the writing was on the wall. And they said, the seminary doesn't have a future in the place where it has been for so long. That seminary in South Carolina is over and just saw an outpouring of all the feelings that people feel when those special holy places feel like they are being taken away. And this place is of that unity. And I feel it personally. It's actually 2 generations in my family because my parents were students at this seminary. They're Lutheran pastors, and that's the place where my family lived when I was born. And so I don't remember it, but that was the home I came home to as an infant. And then moved to that place. Nora, who just turned 9, was 6 months old. So it was this cool parallel where I was this young infant. And Aubrey taught at the elementary school that was directly across the street from the seminary, and every morning Nora and I would walk across the street and drop Aubrey off at her kindergarten class, and then walk back to the campus. And in doing that, I would walk right past the apartment building where my family had lived long before. So all that's just to say that it's personal for me, and I understand the feeling of grief that comes with the loss and change of a place like that. That's what Jesus is talking about when he comes into the temple today and he looks around at everything that's happening in the center of Jewish life. And if you think about places that are important to you, it's hard to overstate how central the temple is to the whole identity of the Jewish community. This is the place, we read about God giving Moses the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai. And the story of the Jewish people are, they had it down on tablets, and they journeyed through the wilderness with an ark covering those tablets, and the place where that covenant, the thing that shaped their life with God, it came to rest on this mountain, and they built a temple over it. So it is the holy place where they knew that their life could intersect with the life of God, the life of the divine. We get the story today from John's Gospel. And John is the 4th of the 4 Gospels. And the Gospel writer of John's always got kind of a squirrely take on things. The other 3 Gospel stories, so all 4 stories of Jesus are written by different people who tell the story of Jesus in a little different way. And the first 3, Mark, Matthew, Luke, line up a little more. John goes in a different direction with things often. His was the last gospel to be written down. It was somewhere around the year 90 or 100 AD, so it's like 60 or 70 years after Jesus has been crucified and resurrected, so some time has passed. And the person who writes down John's gospel story puts things in a different order than the others. And so I think we can look at that to see some clues of the story today. And one is that this is coming from chapter 2 of the gospel. In the other 3, so all 4 of the Gospels have this story of Jesus marching in and flipping over the tables and getting angry at what he sees. But the other 3 put that story last. It's like the climax of the story where he's already ridden into town on the donkey, and we've had Palm Sunday. And this is sort of the last straw in those other tellings of what gets Jesus killed, is him making a ruckus in the temple. And so the authorities say, that's it, we have to get rid of this guy. But that's not the way John tells the story. John tells this right at the beginning. That one of the very first things Jesus does, according to this story, is come into the temple and bring everything he sees there to a screeching halt. The other three gospel stories really emphasize that Jesus is mad at some kind of corruption that's happening. He says, this is a den of robbers. You're taking advantage of these people. We don't really hear that in this one very much. In this story, what we hear is that it's almost the Passover, which is a big religious holiday for the Jewish people. So folks have come from all over the Roman Empire. Jews who are scattered all over, they come to the temple and they do what Jewish people are supposed to do. They change their money into... The temple is where everything stops. That's kind of like the effect that Jesus has here. Not so much cleansing as we think of it, or getting rid of corruption or some impure part, but just saying, everybody stop what's happening. And then he says, even if this temple is torn down, God will raise it up again. They don't quite understand in the story what he's talking about. But the first Christian followers of Jesus who read this story, they would have understood what Jesus was talking about. Because I said this gospel got written down around the year 90 or 100 AD. Something that happened like 20 years before that is this temple did get destroyed by the Roman Empire when there was a war between the Jewish people and the Romans. And so when the earliest Christians were reading this story, they have experienced the loss of their temple. This place that was the home of God, the home of the commandments, the place that was the center of their life had been knocked down and obliterated. They had lived through that collective trauma of their holiest of holy places not being there anymore. Having nothing in the place of this thing that had been so central to them. And it's into that collective trauma that Jesus says, even if this place gets torn down, God will raise it up again. We see throughout the story of John, God coming into the world in a human body. And what Jesus says to those people in the temple is that, yes, this is a place where you met God, but it's not the only place where God lives. And throughout the gospel story of John, we see that wherever the person of Jesus goes, wherever Jesus goes in his body, is where God is. The body of Jesus holds God. And where do we see Jesus go? We see Jesus go who has lost a child. Housing. To the people who God is with you here. We all know what it's like to experience that grief and change of the places that formed us and the people who are important to us and the relationships that are sacred to us not lasting forever. You may not have ever set foot on that seminary campus, but it's part of our church